Okay, so I'm going to be reviewing Antonio's speech, and his idea was that nuclear energy is unsafe and unsustainable. While it is true that nuclear energy is unsustainable, the time period in which we're going to run out of uranium to power our nuclear reactors was grossly underestimated. He pulled this quote from wagingpeace.org. He used about 90 years for his quote. So I actually went out and did the math on this. According to the European Nuclear Society, there is 3.3 million tons of uranium left in the Earth's crust. And according to the National Energy Institute, the world uses 2,300 tons of uranium per year. If you do the math on this, the figures leave us a time frame of 1,434 years to deplete the worldwide uranium supply. This also does not include the ability to recycle used nuclear fuel. As per the World Nuclear Association, the number of tons of nuclear waste that can be recycled is 5,630 tons per year. This means that we can recycle double the amount of waste that we put out yearly. There is an issue with this process, however. 1% of this nuclear waste cannot be properly recycled or completely turned into new nuclear fuel. This has to be stored for a couple hundred years, but this problem is saved by the Yucca Mountain Institute in Nevada. This facility is capable of storing 77,000 tons of nuclear waste without issue. Also, when compared to the current sustainability of fossil fuels are severely lacking when compared to nuclear energy. The Colorado River Commission has stated that the world oil reserves last about 98 years until they're completely depleted. Also, they date natural gas at 166 years and coal at 230 years, which is absolutely nothing when compared to the 1,434 years to deplete uranium sources. Okay, the next point that he had was that nuclear energy is unsafe. This only applies to cases that are extreme, such as world disasters, where stuff would end up going wrong anyway. One example of a nation that has little to no problems with nuclear energy is France. 80% of its power comes from nuclear sources. To do this, it currently has 56 online reactors that have been operating for 40 years straight. Of this, they've only had 11 total accidents. 8 of them have been completely contained on site, which means nothing leaked out, nothing went into the atmosphere. And of the accidents that managed to extend outside the facilities, the major issue that happened, as in the worst one, is that the drinking water next to it was contaminated for a total of 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, the half-life on the isotopes that leaked out into the lake became perfectly safe and stable, which means you could go over and drink that water as much as you wanted. Another issue that was brought up in the course of the argument was that nuclear power irradiates the water and life surrounding the plant. While this is true, the scale at which it was demonstrated was greatly exaggerated. This quote from Dana Christensen, an associate lab director for the energy and engineering at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. In fact, the fly ash emitted by a power plant that produces coal carries into the surrounding environment 100 times more radiation than a nuclear power plant producing the same amount of energy. This is due to coal containing uranium. When coal is burned and the ash is thrown up in the air, the uranium travels with it and seeps into the water and eventually the crops that you're going to be eating. If this is not enough, Scientific American quotes that the average person encounters 360 millirems of annual background radiation while basically living on this planet. There's no way to stop this radiation from hitting you, it's just a fact of living here. The average radiation occurred from living next to a nuclear power plant is between 3 and 6 millirems for the same year, which is absolutely nothing when you tack that on top. Also, nuclear power does not lead to the creation of acid rain and the inhalation of coal dust. So in the end, nuclear energy, when compared to today's ways of making energy, is safe and sustainable for at least 1,434 years.
All right, the structural issues are laid out pretty well. The uranium issue is the one that you start off with most effectively, and you have a clear set of numbers that you're using for your counterclaim to explain the longevity of this as an energy resource. And so the notion of it being sustainable, you sound like you're conceding the point when in fact you are substantially suggesting that the notion of sustainability with nuclear is a lot greater than in any of the alternatives. The counterclaim also on recycling I thought was pretty effective, although I think you could use a little bit more data on this and a source citation on it. The Yucca Mountain resort or storage issue has been mentioned here. I'm not sure that the plan has ever been approved. I'm not sure that there's a great deal of confidence that it's going to happen. And so I think that as a potential solution, it's there, but I think that you might be suggesting that it is a solution that's already been in place, and I don't know that that's the case. In fact, there's some doubt about that. Most of your discussion about the alternatives are okay. You put it in the context of coal especially and the dangers that come along from it. The safety issue, I think you're trying to rely too much on the French example. I think it's a good place to start, but of course what's going to be going on in everybody's head are the illustrations that have popped up. You've got Chernobyl back in the old Soviet Union. You've got all the problems that are being faced with Japan right now because of the natural disaster. You sort of dismiss that because you say, well, it's in the context of a natural disaster, so you're going to have problems anyway, but I don't know that we would have the same kind of problems if there had been a tsunami and came along and it washed over on the coal plants, that we would be faced with the issues of danger that we're currently faced with there in Japan. So, your attempt to minimize that, I think, is a little bit problematic. The general issue on the third point concerning water, I thought you did a good job on that. And again, you do a lot of contrast to the other sources of energy and suggest that it's really relatively safe in comparison to those things. A couple of times it felt a little awkward having the page up in front of your face. I think you do want to talk a little bit more about the evidence that the advocate used. You've got a lot of counterclaim stuff, but there's not as much analysis of the evidence and reasoning used by the advocate as I think would be desirable to really give the contrast to your position. All right, thank you.